So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on the 20th of May. The webinar is part of a series of events that we are organizing. July, can you put your mic off? Okay, sorry for that. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, joining us on this webinar series. This is a series as part of an HAQUA initiative. HAQUA is an harmonization, accreditation, quality assurance in African higher education project. That is looking at the coherence and convergence of the quality systems within our African higher education scene. Now, this series is part of a CESA a series that is looking at the groundwork that we're trying to lay in terms of policy in higher education. We will mention that later on. And this is one series that enables us to discuss among the different areas within the higher education scene in Africa. Within the CESA, I believe majority of the people know what CESA is. It's an agenda for African higher education, part of the African Union agenda for continental education strategy. And CESA has different clusters. There's one main cluster, which is the higher education cluster, and that is what we are focusing on. Within the higher education cluster, we have different subclusters, and today we will be focusing on the open distance online education subcluster of the CESA agenda. Now, before I open, I have a few instructions to give. Within this webinar, we are going to have interpretation in different languages, English, Portuguese, and French. So when you look down on the screen, you'll be able to see a globe phenomena. Please click on that icon and choose the language that you feel you're comfortable listening to or getting the coverage on. And then again, the most important thing is kindly make sure that if you have any questions, we have the Q&A aspect of it on the lower part of it. Click on it, type any question or any comment you have. We'll be looking at it throughout the webinar, and we'll alert our panelists and our speakers to any questions that arise so that they can address it. So feel free to use those two features, and we'll be able to proceed from that. Now, before I go ahead, I'll give the floor to our African Professor Ehile for Association of African Universities to give an opening remarks for this session. Please, Professor Ehile, go ahead.
Merci, Apio, distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs.
Thank you to the facilitator. Thank you, Apio, dear panelists. On behalf of the Association of African Universities, I would like to welcome all the participants to this roundtable with regards to transition of e-distance learning to online learning for higher learning, higher teaching in the African continent. The Association of African Universities is responsible for the coordination of the group of higher education for the continental strategy for education in Africa. The acronym is CESA. We are currently living in a pandemic sans precedent, and that, of course, has an impact on the African educational system. And this is therefore an opportunity without precedent for strengthening our e-distance education systems so as to make them more resilient and resistant. This constitutes an excellent occasion so as to send out a message to our African governments on the urgent need of reinforcing our institutions and our educational systems so as to prepare them for the future and so as to make them capable of surviving and prospering in a context of uncertainty. The universities, the African universities, have the need of receiving support from governments so as to be able to acquire the necessary resilience to work from a strategic standpoint. When the pandemic struck, I decided to send out an invitation to the Ministry of Education in Africa so that this ministry starts to consider different elements within investments so as to convert or transform our institutions into more resilient ones. Along these lines, I asked the African governments to give priority to investments on internet infrastructures and to facilitate connectivity of all citizens. The reinforcement of national resources for research and education is at a turning point. And this is not to, of course, we are not just a provider of internet services. We should be able to be capable of offering platforms to be able to share contents for collaboration and research. And most African countries have implemented but this technology has not been supported just as yet, and it has not the necessary maturity so as to become an effective provider of services for the African institutions. Therefore, we call upon the African governments to invest on the reinforcements of their national research and education networks so as to be able to work out connectivity problems that these students and universities and researchers are being faced with in Africa. That is the reason why this round table intends to discuss the necessary conditions for the materialization of a transition from distance learning to e-learning. I hope that you will have very fruitful debates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ile. We really appreciate the vision and the work that AAU is doing. And now, before I leave the floor for Professor Goski, I'd just like to make a short introduction. Professor Goski is our host for today, Goski Alabi. And Professor Goski is an academic, an author, and entrepreneur. She is the president of Lawe Open University, which is the first accredited Open University College in Ghana. And Professor Goski have several documents and publications that she has on her shoulder. So I give the floor to Professor Goski to proceed on and introduce.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Akuyo. Is that correct? And I would like to thank very much the AU, the AAU, OBREL, the ACDE, and the All African Students Union, ASU, for being a part of this important webinar. As have already been indicated, the main focus of the CESA subcluster on open distance and e-learning is to contribute towards the Sustainable Development Goal 4, that is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and to promote lifelong learning for all. We are all aware that we cannot end distance education in Africa, and this is why this is very important to us. We also believe that the pandemic brought another perspective. The pandemic really made it very necessary for us to realize the importance and critical role in achieving our Sustainable Development Goal 4. Particularly for us in Africa, it is to be able to enhance access and quality at the same time, because e-learning promotes transparency in education. We also believe that the pandemic hit the education sector very hard, and there were challenges as well as lessons that we learned. Our aim today is to look at what lessons we learned during the pandemic. And for us, the most important one is the fact that, yes, we can. Because when the pandemic struck, many of our institutions were doing distance education, but were not really involved in e-learning. However, we all moved on or the other. And so it has become clear that moving forward, post-pandemic, e-learning has come to stay. And it has role to play not only in access and quality, but also in transnational education. So today, for this experts roundtable, our aim is to ascertain policy to promote the transition of distance education to e-learning in. The focus for today is on West Africa. And to do this, we would have two sessions. The first session would be for us to have a research report that focuses on the experiences and lessons learned from students, from faculty, and from university administrators. Then we would have our expert panelists. The panel discussion will be led by Professor Olivia Zegede. I hope I got it right. And we would also have about 5 other panelists who would be speaking. We would have Professor Olivia Papong, who is the Dean at the University of Ghana for the Center for Adult Education. And we would also have Professor Ogidan. Professor Ogidan is a professor at the Nigerian Open University and the immediate past executive director of the African Council for Distance Education. We also would have our own Professor Barry Boubacar Barry, who is the CEO for WACRAN, representing AFRAN, that is the Education Networks of Africa. He would be touching on the IT preparedness. And then we also have the 2 presenters that would be in the persons of Mr. Abdullahi Munkaila and also Mrs. Veronica. I have a bit of difficulty, Veronica, mentioning your surname, but I hope you would pardon me for that. So I trust that I have touched on all our speakers and panelists, and I trust that Professor Jagade will take over and continue from there. So if Prof. Barry has not joined us yet, then we would be going straight to have our research presentations. But to Professor Jagade, please take over. Thank you very much for your participation, and welcome to all the participants as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Or good afternoon, depending on what part of the globe you are in. We've already had the introductions, so I don't need to go into any further introductions. May I request that people put off their phones because it's disturbing whatever we are doing. And if you are not speaking, you should please mute yourself so that there's no disturbance coming from your side. As has been told us and has been advertised several weeks ago, this expert consultative roundtable is on distance learning, and it's looking especially at e-learning in higher education in Africa, in West Africa. Let me just start by saying one or two things about this. There is a classical definition of distance learning that was done by Desmond Keegan and Otto Peters. They did that in the 1980s, I think 1982, 83. And that definition of distance education has got 5 characteristics. And from then on to now, any variant or form of distance learning tries to fit into one of the 5. At the moment, what we have is that most of what is happening in the world today is looking at distance education from a very narrow angle. And the narrow angle is the effect of technology. So really, yes, we say we are transiting from distance learning to e-learning. We are not actually transiting. Distance education is distance education, either virtual learning or e-learning or hybrid learning or whatever learning or virtual learning. These are forms or variants or other types of distance learning. So if you like, distance learning is like it's an umbrella, and every other thing comes down from it. Now, the next point I'd like to make is that Africa, or particularly West Africa, is catching up on e-learning. We are catching up on e-learning because of certain reasons. I will mention only 2. One is that currently there has been the transformation of everything that everybody is doing around the world and drastically being affected by the 4th industrial revolution. And the 4th industrial revolution has been popularized by the World Economic Forum 18. The World Industrial Revolution talks about various types of things that we must do in whatever we are doing, and has got several areas, several trending issues that has been mentioned on that. We don't have time to do that. But that's one step that has affected people now moving on to using the disruptive aspect of technology in teaching and learning. The second is the pandemic. I need to mention that people erroneously think that it is the pandemic that brought in e-learning. No, it isn't. The pandemic only accelerated it. People have been using technology in distance learning for years, since 1728. People have been using distance learning or technology in distance learning since 1728, when Anantikna and others decided to use distance learning to teach shorthand. So what we are having, starting from correspondence to whatever and to e-learning today, has been the movement to different types and forms of distance learning. So what has happened in the past 2 years is that because of the pandemic, a lot of people were now saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to contact our students? So the only way was to go into using the technology, the disruptive aspect of technology or different variants to do distance learning, and that's where we are. So two things quickly. We are moving into e-learning, or we are using e-learning as part of distance learning because of the dictates or the demands of the 4th industrial revolution, and 2, because the pandemic has accelerated our use. To discuss these issues and in different areas, we have 5 people to do that. And we have Professor Boubacar Barry, we have Professor Rotimi Ogidon, we have Dr. Teresa Mwoma, we have Professor Olivia Papong, and we also have our good friend Peter Koje to discuss it. I wonder if Barry is available. I hear he's just trying to catch a flight to go back to Dakar or something like that. So if and when he's able to join us, we will get, before the session closes, we'll get him to do the presentation. But since he's not around, I think it would be nice to move on to our group, or the group of researchers who have been able to survey the stakeholders' preparedness to look at open and distance education in Africa. And if they are ready, may I call on Ms. Veronica Ziagu and Mr. Abdullahi Mukaila to give us a very short presentation, about 10 to 15 minutes, on the findings of their survey research. Over to you. I don't know who is starting first. Will it be Veronica or will it be Abdullahi? Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Jegede, and good morning to the distinguished panelists and participants in this meeting. It's my pleasure. Can I have the video? Okay, it's my pleasure to be part of this critical discussion about the future of learning in Africa. My colleague Munkaila and I are presenting the survey report on stakeholders' preparedness and challenges for the adoption of online and distance education in Africa, the perspectives of students, faculty, and administrators. I will begin the presentation with the purpose of the survey, the methodology, demographics of the target population, and students' perspectives with related policy recommendations. After that, I'll hand over to my colleague to present on the perspectives of faculty and administrators. The purpose for conducting the survey was to examine the experiences of students, faculty, and administrators of higher education institutions in Africa with open and distance education during the COVID-19 pandemic. The essence is to use the experiences of these stakeholders to inform the development of a continental strategy for e-learning, open, distance, and flexible learning in Africa. The survey instrument was administered primarily through the online medium due to the spread of the target population, which covered the West Africa sub-region. And the instrument was self-developed and submitted for validation by experts in the field of open and distance education before it was deployed. Our methodology involved the use of a mixed method approach for data collection. This was because we wanted to collect both qualitative and quantitative data from the target groups for the study. Our key targets were students, faculty and administrators of higher educational institutions in West Africa. And majority of our respondents came from Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Niger. In total, we had 388 respondents to the survey. The responses were collated from the responses collated from the target population were taken through descriptive and thematic analysis, based on which I present the following findings. Beginning with the demographic data, the results show that majority of the respondents were students. We had a total of 256 students responding to the survey, making 65.9% of the total respondents. This could be considered as a fair distribution, looking at the ratio of students to faculty and administrators in higher education institutions on the continent. Also, we did the gender analysis and saw that the majority of the respondents were male, out of which we had 51% and 51.49% male students, 48.51% being female. For faculty, we had 53% male, 46% female, and for administrators, we had 84% being male and 15% being female. Now, we move on to the students' experience with open and distance learning. So The questions targeting students aimed at assessing their level of awareness of e-learning, their prior experiences, willingness to use and recommend e-learning models. A total of 73% of the students provided a positive response to questions related to awareness of e-learning, meaning that majority of the students were aware or knew about e-learning even before the COVID pandemic. Also, 80% of the students surveyed indicated that they received some form of training prior to the pandemic. When asked whether they will continue with e-learning, 75% of the students responded in the affirmative. Also, 77% of the students indicated that they were willing to recommend the use of e-learning to others. The survey also explored the major challenges. Let's move to the next slide, please. The survey also explored the major challenges faced by students when using e-learning platforms. Among the main challenges identified were erratic internet connectivity, high cost of data usage, the unfriendly nature of some of the learning platforms, the unavailability of digital libraries to provide e-resources for additional learning, and then the non-responsiveness of some facilitators was also identified as a problem by the students. Some of the students also reported adaptability difficulties, pointing to some gaps in training and orientation for online learning. And then the final challenge had to do with unreliable power supply. So we also found that the students adopted various strategies to overcome the challenges they identified. 49% of the students indicated that they bought additional data to be able to ensure they stay connected during lessons on the e-learning platform. 18% said they had to change their location to stay connected. 13% had to borrow a device from someone that is either a friend or family to be able to stay connected, and 17% had to change their device, whereas 30% had to go to 3% had to rely on internet or cyber cafes. Based on the findings of the survey, the following recommendations have been proposed to address the issues arising from the use of e-learning from the perspective of students. First of all, higher education institutions must set up effective learner support services for effective participation on the e-learning platforms. We also recommend the design and implementation of user-friendly learning management systems. And then the design and implementation of open distance and e-learning policies to direct faculty responsiveness to learner issues. And then we also recommend an integration of features into the learning management systems to allow off-internet usage by students. We also recommend partnership with telecommunications companies to provide free data for students to enable them to stay connected on the learning platforms. And finally, we recommend an integrated digital library. We recommend integrating a digital library into the learning management system for ease of access to academic resources by the students. So I will end here and hand over to my colleague to continue with faculty and administrators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for the wonderful presentation. So I'll take it from the
faculty perspective and then administrators perspective.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So from the faculty perspective, we try to find out whether faculty had prior e-learning experience before the COVID. 83% of the respondents indicated that they had experience with e-learning even before the pandemic came to being. And 17% indicated that they had no prior experience with regards to e-learning, but it was the COVID that forced them to join the e-learning environment. Then we also wanted to find out from faculty what is their experience compared to the face-to-face with e-learning. Respondents indicated that the e-learning is very convenient for them because they are able to teach anywhere, anytime. They also indicated that the e-learning reduces the burden for faculty because it makes studies to be learner-centered, unlike the face-to-face, which is more of teacher-centered. They also indicated that there's excessive workload on faculty as a result of e-learning, because faculty are now required to read and provide prompt feedback to all students, inquiries, questions, and assignments. Notably, they also indicate that unlike the face-to-face, there's unreliable internet connectivity and high cost of data for e-learning, which makes it sometimes very frustrating for faculty. So generally, the respondents were of the view that the e-learning is very convenient and flexible for them to deploy for teaching. And they will prefer such kind of environment to teach if only the issues of internet connectivity and data are adequately addressed by stakeholders. Then we also wanted to find out whether faculty had training on e-learning models. The 95% responded in affirmative, and they also 97.67% indicated that it was useful training that they received on e-learning activities. Then we probed further to find out what kind of training did they receive. 97% indicated that the training was about facilitation in e-learning environment. 18.6% indicated they received training on course administration. 2.3% indicated the training was on quality assurance related, while 60.4% indicated that the training was on instructional design. Having received this kind of training, we wanted to probe further whether there's a need for further training, looking at their experiences during the COVID period. And majority indicated that they need more training on examination and assessment. Particularly on examination, their concern was they needed training on how to set exam items or questions, and also the mechanisms they could deploy to ensure the integrity of assessment and examination. They also indicated they need further training in instructional design, and they need more training on quality assurance. And most importantly, for the quantitative and statistical lecturers, they were concerned on how to use the virtual boards within the learning management system to teach quantitative related courses. So they think that training in these areas will be very, very important. Few of them indicated that they will need training to understand the design of applications. That is how the LMS is being developed. Some of them think that when they have understanding of it, they were able to give some feedback to the developers to help enhance the process of teaching in virtual environment.
Well, you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay. When asked about their challenges, they indicated that unstable internet, high cost of data, low interactivity and participation of students, and also developing examination question items and assessment rubrics were some of the challenges they encountered. We asked them whether they were willing to recommend to other users, and 98% responded in affirmative. Then let's look at the administrators' perspective. For administrators, they said 100%, they had 100% awareness and knowledge of e-learning, and they'll be willing to support a movement or a requirement for mandatory establishment of e-learning centers in higher education institutions, because they saw that there was the need for these e-learning centers when the COVID started. When asked administrators what role can they play or are they playing in e-learning environment, they indicated that they serve as coordinators, they provide support for ODL infrastructure, they oversee the development of ODL policies, and they provide system support services to ODL users. And they also undertake monitoring and evaluation of faculty and students' activities and their experiences within the e-learning. Lastly but not the least, they also oversee the development and implementation of quality assurance systems for ODL activities. I would want to look at the challenges.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mukaila, I think time is up, so we'll just go on to, you will have this time, maybe during the question and answer time, you may have time to reflect on what you have. Yep.
With your permission, could I kindly request for 2 more minutes for them to finish their presentation, as this is critical to the entire webinar. Thank you.
Okay, so
thank you very much.
Let me move to the policy recommendations. So based on the experiences of the faculty administrators, these are the policy recommendations that we think will help to strengthen the e-learning environment in higher education. 1, there's a need to develop a common West African e-learning policy for adoption by various higher education institutions in West Africa. We need to encourage our governments to issue policy directives to set up e-learning centers across higher education institutions in West Africa. We need to review the quality assurance policies to incorporate e-learning activities. So with regards to this, we can look at the ACD quality toolkits as a starting point for higher education institutions. There's also the need for higher education institutions to provide continuous training to faculty on the development of examination and assessment. And it is important that we have an integrated system of the platform for school administration and for learning management system, because both the faculty and the administrators think that there should be one platform that they should all use to monitor and to conduct academic business within higher education. Then there also the need to establish a common West African integrated technology infrastructure, that we should have a common e-resources or service that can serve the needs of the various e-learning centers we are encouraging government to set up within higher education institutions. Most importantly, we have to encourage government to establish e-library centers for higher education institutions in Africa. We can also look at negotiating and signing MOUs with governments and telecommunications to expand the coverage and strengthen their services so they can be reliable internet and data support for usage by higher education institutions at a reduced cost. This will enable more students' participation and more faculty and administrators will be able to deploy the e-learning infrastructure for teaching and learning. There's also the need to invest in the design of quality assurance and e-learning refresher models so that there can be regular training and professional development of faculty and administration. Looking at
your 2 minutes is up. The extra 2 minutes is up, but I'll give you half a minute left. I'll give you half a minute.
So we think that looking at the nature of the e-learning environment going forward, we're looking at pushing for certification in e-learning models as mandatory requirement for future employment of faculty administrators in higher education institutions in West Africa. Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica and Mukaila, for that wonderful presentation. We will now go into the panelists making their own contributions. We're going to have, we'll listen to them from 4 perspectives. One is from the aspect of lecturers, or what the Americans call faculty, or if you like, teachers. They will be looking at it from the continental view on the strategies, particularly using the ACD Quality Assurance Toolkit. They will be looking at it from management, and then finally we'll be looking at it from the student perspective. Just before I call on Professor Ogidon, I will suggest that students who have comments or people who have comments should please note these things down, because we're not going to be having comments after each person. And then at a later stage, when every presentation is done, we will call on people. But one thing I guess we have gathered from this is one, for me, the interesting thing, the fact that 83% said that they have prior experience before COVID of e-learning. So that actually supports what I said earlier on. We have been told about student challenges, but what I'm not too sure is whether those challenges address, the recommendations we are getting address the challenges of the students directly. We need to also look at the faculty needs, but more importantly, from the research strategy point of view, we didn't get to hear anything about your sampling strategy. I hope you'll say it later on. And did you use stratified random sampling or stratified proportionate random sampling or convenience sampling? And you had 388 as total respondents in Africa. What is the population are we looking at? So all this might be interesting, because I'm saying this because from a researcher point of view, you might need to have an idea of all this before you start generalizing. Thank you very much. I will now call on, if he's ready, Professor Rotimi Ogidon, who has been earlier introduced to you as the immediate past Executive Director of African Council for Distance Education, and is a professor, a renowned professor at the National Open University of Nigeria. And he is to make his own presentation focusing on faculty or lecturers or teachers. Thank you very much. Could you please, Mukana, could you please take off your sharing? Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this very important forum. I'm particularly humbled to state that I feel indeed elated for being part of this forum, because somebody that I want to regard as the father of ODL is seated among us, in person of Professor Olivia, who actually brought us into the knowledge of ODL as the first Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria. It was through his also his intervention that I was able to serve as the Executive Director of the African Council for Distance Education. So I want to thank him. I also want to thank the ACD President, Professor Gospel Alabi, for the invitation. Now, let me go straight to my own assignment, which is the faculty support to the migration to e-learning. The process of migrating teaching and learning activities from open and distance education to the online platform has indeed become a veritable method of disseminating knowledge nowadays, particularly because of the continuous high demand for university education, coupled with the emergence of the dreadful COVID-19 pandemic, which has necessitated the need to observe social.
I think we have a bit of technical hitch, so we just, maybe it's a connection problem. As the researchers have told us, both students and lecturers are talking about difficulty in connecting. So let's hope he's going to reconnect. And if he's doing so, may we please advise him to share his PowerPoint slides. Hello? Uh-oh. Hello? Well, this is definitely something that CESA or the African Union should be trying to correct or help Africa with connectivity, and particularly for students. So if from faculty or lecturers we are having this connectivity problem, you can imagine the litany of issues or problems that students will have in terms of connectivity. And that has always been a problem in Africa. And I wished we'll be able to get the perspective of Professor Abubakar Bari, because we know that people getting access to connectivity has become so expensive in Africa. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, the amount of money that an individual will pay to get access, to get to a router, to get access to a network, is actually the amount, is what is given to universities in Africa. So an individual in America or in North America has got a larger and bigger access to internet, to whatever, at a very, very cheap rate than we have it in Africa. And that has been a big problem. I know that main one, which is the major.
I had a problem with my.
Okay, thank God you are back now. So go ahead and please share your slide.
Oh, you want me to share my slides, sir?
I think that would be good, so that people can follow you even if you have problem technically with them.
Okay.
Go to share screen. There's a place where it says share screen.
Yes, that's what.
And then go and pick the slide. I mean the file. Otherwise, I think the Secretariat has it. They can continue to flash your slides while you speak.
Yeah, if you prefer that, we can do that if you prefer.
Yes, please. I think you should help him out. He should be flashing the slides while he speaks.
Okay, so just continue speaking. Give me a second so that I can.
So continue speaking before we have any other issue again.
Okay. Yeah, so like I was saying, that the African Union in 2016 had noted that the capacity to absorb the massive number of graduates of the secondary education system will necessitate building additional modern infrastructure and providing innovative delivery such as distance and open virtual learning using ICT and other available means. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, we are. We are also seeing we're on screen now. So yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you, sir. Now, the aspirations of the African Union is very much admirable, because this is the exact time when we need this intervention that has to do with how to harness the capacity of ICT to improve access, quality and management of education and training systems, launch comprehensive and effective literacy program across the continent to eradicate the scourge of literacy, and strengthen linkages between the world of work, education, and training systems. Now, I want to quickly go to features of ODL because I don't want us to waste so much time. Some of the features of the open distance and e-learning are education that is accessible to people who cannot attend regular classes due to social, structural, or personal situations. Flexibility to study at any time and place. Specialized training for professionals. Quick material delivery. Is learner-centered. Is good quality learning materials. And provision of learner support services. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to say that faculty in higher education institutions across West Africa is the fulcrum of teaching and learning. Just like research,
I think we are having another technical hitch. So we just, if you can, please, if you can, Secretariat, if you can keep flashing his presentation, the slides, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can be spending 1 minute or so on each of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I hope there's a facility for the Secretariat to share immediately all the slides that are presented.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear now. Go ahead.
Let me just quickly go into the roles of the faculty. So as to save time. So a faculty is composed of educators, like the professors or teachers, whose aim is to impart knowledge to the learners in the school, college, or university. These are specially trained people who have been hired with the purpose of providing education to the students. The faculty is therefore expected to ensure that there is effective classroom teaching, academic advising, and playing other roles that are connected with development of the curriculum, learning assessment, research, and other scholarly activities.
Please move the slide to the sixth slide, please.
The sixth slide.
No, Secretariat, you move. Are you the one? Are you able to control your slide, or because the Secretariat is putting in
Eloy is the one projecting?
Yes, so he should move on fast, quickly with it. I think it's not.
Let me know when I need to move you the
sorry.
slide and I will do it.
Go ahead. You just go ahead, Professor Gideon. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So now, the faculty supports in specific terms are to support learners in the choice of project topics, allocation of learners to supervisors, supervising students' projects, coordinating students' seminar presentation, supervision of students in electronic exam, guide students in the selection of academic programs, conduct tutor-marked assignments, provide online learning support for students, ensure an effective use of feedback on tutor-marked assignments, provide guidance on how to access the virtual library, inform students on the link to the OER and MOOCs. And some of the facilities that can be used by the faculty are radio, that is phone-in program, audio, video tapes, live teleconferencing, computer-mediated learning, mobile phone contact, electronic SMS, audio cassettes, use of audio cassette, video compact disc, radio broadcast, online synchronous model of interaction, and online asynchronous model of interaction. And there are lots of advantages of teaching online, which are already prepared in the slides that are before you. There are also challenges. There are lots of challenges. For example, like I'm making presentation now, and we are unfortunately being occasionally interrupted, either because of bandwidth problem. So the issue of internet connectivity can be a challenge. There is also cost of ICT infrastructure. There is need for regular supply of electricity, uninterrupted internet connectivity, like I said, very high cost of procuring and maintaining telephone services, irregular internet connectivity, which we have just experienced, high cost of procuring computer laptops. Then we also have high cost of printing or downloading materials by the learners. And most distant learners in countries also have phobia for the use of computer. So we need to address this. Most learners also misconceive facilitation for face-to-face. And we also have epileptic supply of electricity. And we have recommendations here. One of the recommendations is partnering with industries such as ICT facility manufacturers for technical and material support, encourage workplace training for learners such that specific training, particularly those who require to acquire some specific skills, signing of memorandum of understanding between institutions and the electronic mobile organizations such as Safaricom, MTN, Telcom, Etisalat, and so on and so forth. Then encourage the use of power bank and solar system to mitigate the problem of unstable electricity supply, provide regular online support to learners in order to save students from being frustrated in the online teaching and learning activities. Provide corresponding audio, video tapes, and video compact disc. Organize television and teleconferencing programs. Provide corresponding audio, video tapes. I have mentioned that. And if we're able to do this, I think the idea of moving from the what I regard as single mode be easy and it's going to be effective. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you very, very much. You were to finish at 1 minute after 12 or 1 minute after 11, but and I was going to give you an extra 2 minutes for your technical upset, but you have finished within time, less than that. So thank you so much for that presentation. What I could get out of what you have said, particularly, is the challenges that you have listed for lecturers or faculty seem to agree with the challenges that the researchers have also preferred, have also given to us. So that puts a lot of pressure on either the CESA, the total CESA Secretary or African Union, or probably even ACDE or an AAU, to begin to look into how to mitigate the challenges and the stress of lecturers and probably students in all this in facing these challenges. Thank you so much, Professor Gideon, for that. The next will be Dr. Teresa Muoma from the ACDE, who will be talking to us about the strategies and particularly spending time on the ACD Quality Assurance Toolkit. It is 12:01 and you have a maximum of 15 minutes to go. And your time begins right now. Thank you, Dr. Muoma.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Professor Jegede. And thank you for the organizers of the conference, of the webinar, for inviting me to come and share with you. My name is Teresa Muoma, and as they have said, I'm the Executive Director, African Council for Distance Education. And this morning, this afternoon, this evening, for the different locations where we are, I want to take you through the strategies for transitioning from distance learning to e-learning and the ACD Quality Assurance Toolkit. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it very well.
Thank you. I just want to give you a brief overview or introduction or background of the African Council for Distance Education. African Council for Distance Education is a membership organization. It's continental in nature, and it comprises of African universities and other higher institutions of learning. The focus of the African Council for Distance Education is to expand access to quality education and training through open distance and e-learning. The African Council for Distance Education was recognized as the lead implementing agency for open and distance learning in Africa during the 4th Conference of the Education Ministers in Africa that was held in Mombasa, and ACD was accorded an observer status at the African Union Commission in November 2010. The Ministers of Education in Africa held their very first All Africa Ministers Conference on Open Learning and Distance Education in Cape Town, South Africa, and that was in the year 2004. They identified 2 major challenges to distance education in Africa. One of it was how to manage access, quality, and cost to ensure affordability and learners' success. Number two, the challenge of how to ensure quality in distance education provision. Having this in mind, so what is our vision as a council? Our vision is to be a major player in the promotion and advocacy for open and distance learning in Africa. And for us to achieve that, we have a mission of promoting collaboration, research, and quality assurance in open and distance learning to increase access to quality education and training in Africa. So, what are we doing in terms of promoting collaboration and research? The African Council for Distance Education established the Technical Committee on Collaboration, which is being hosted by the Open University of Tanzania. The mandate of this Technical Committee on Collaboration is to encourage cooperation, sharing of human, material, resources, credit transfers, as well as staff and student exchange among ACD member institutions. Having this committee in place, ACD has been able, or the committee has been able to accomplish the following. They have been able to put a policy on collaboration in place. They have been able to establish working groups to prioritize collaboration in open and distance learning, as well as research. They have been, we have had an opportunity to collaborate with partners like the Commonwealth of Learning, Open University, UK, CESA. We have been able to conduct capacity building in relation to research methods for the ACD member institutions. And recently, last year, we were able to conduct a training on pathways to learning, which attracted a huge number of participants from the African countries or institutions in the African countries. Currently, ACD, in collaboration with the Open University UK, we are conducting a research focusing on digital decisions in teaching online. And we are doing this in 4 ACD member institutions. That is the National Open University Nigeria, Kenyatta University, Lawe Open University Ghana, and University of South Africa. Once the report is ready, we should be able to share with our members and also with all those that we have contacts. In terms of promoting quality in open and distance learning, what have we done? African Council for Distance Education established an independent unit, Quality Assurance and Accreditation Agency, which is being hosted by the National Open University of Nigeria. The mandate of this Quality Assurance and Accreditation Agency is to promote and develop an African framework, criteria and standards for guiding member institutions towards quality assurance in open and distance learning. The agency monitors, audits, accredits, and advises on programs to enhance quality assurance mechanisms and processes. Among the achievements of the Quality Assurance and Accreditation Agency, we have been able to produce an open and distance learning quality assurance toolkit. The toolkit has been validated in collaboration with the Open and Distance Learning International Reference Group. We have been, in the last 5 years, we have been able to train over 140 quality assurance trainers of trainers from 11 ACD member institutions. So having that kind of background at the back of our mind, what are some of the strategies we foresee for transitioning to open to distance or e-learning? Number one, we are encouraging higher education institutions to adopt and use the African Council for Distance Education Quality Toolkit to improve practice and service provision in the open and distance learning. We are also keen to support member institutions to train quality assurance trainers of trainers who will train members of staff in their various institutions. And we will be able to share the toolkit for the various organizations to familiarize themselves with it and also start using it. Then, as a council, we are keen to offer external peer review leading to the certification of institutions that meet the ACD quality assurance standards and publish them in our website so that anybody from the world can be able, whenever they want support from those who have been trained or who have met the standards, they can be the points of reference. And having this, it will also influence or create an opportunity for collaboration among institutions to benchmark from those that are doing well. Number four, we are keen to expand our stakeholders' scope to leverage on and tap on their expertise. This means we are keen to include or recruit more members in universities who are not currently our members. We are keen to also our regulators to meet the standards of our regulators. We are keen to work with the ministries of education in the different countries and the intergovernmental organizations such as AU, UNESCO, AUC, etc., name them. And then we are also keen to tap on the expertise of the national and regional networks such as WACREN, Ubuntu, AAU, ASU, because all these are critical partners in this space. We are currently working on our 2021-2025 strategic plan to align our programs to the changing open and distance e-learning trends. We are also rebranding the council to align with the current needs of society and emerging learning trends. And this was approved in the just ended 60 ACD General Assembly. And we are in the process of ensuring that legally we are able to rebrand and we soon announce who we are. We are encouraging more universities and higher institutions of learning in Africa to join ACD as members, including all of you who are in this forum. In conclusion, I want to say that the success in transitioning to open distance and e-learning requires concerted efforts of all actors, players in higher education. That means collaboration and partnership between and among national and regional actors, networks is very critical to avoid doing the same things parallel instead of tapping. For example, if WACREN, they are doing very well in infrastructure, in ICT and all that. Why don't we partner with you so that you can support the African Council for Distance Education members to be able to tap on what you are good in doing it. If we have a toolkit, why can't we partner with you so that we are able to train your people on quality assurance? You are able to use our toolkit, and that complementarity in what one is strong at, we will have a region, an Africa that is stronger than when we are doing things in our own silos. Number 3, adoption and use of the ACD Quality Assurance Toolkit will provide an opportunity for self-assessment to measure the institution's strengths and weaknesses, and also for consistency in provision of quality assurance. Now, I am aware that every institution, every country has their own quality assurance measures or guidelines in place. But where we are coming in is to have that consistency across Africa. How do we ensure that when a university in East Africa is implementing open and distance learning, another university in North Africa is implementing a distance or e-learning, are not deviating so much? It is by recognizing the tool, the ACD Quality Assurance tool, using it. Finally, all this can only happen if the CEOs, if the leadership of higher institutions of learning are willing to address identified areas, weaknesses, strengths, and be able and ready to work with the African Council for Distance Education on this. So thank you so much, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for such a very lucid, succinct presentation. You kept exactly to time. You spent your 15 minutes to the dot, and thank you very much for that presentation. Just one or two things for members to reflect on. When you were speaking, you talked about, not in any particular order, but you were talking about the under strategies, the efforts to implement all that ACD is keen to do. I'm not too sure when, have you started implementing it, or you are just thinking of implementing that? I think that's something you need to work on. Africa needs to know whether you are still thinking of, or you are still keen, or you are already working on it, or they are all being implemented. I think that will be something to look at. You talked about your 2021 to 2025 strategic plan. And 2021 is already almost half year gone. You are still working on the strategic plan, or it is ready? It should have been ready for implementation. So that's something we need to look at. Because if you are going to go through, by the time you get it done, by the time you review it, you are going into 2022. So I don't know why you're going to do it. In my part of the world, they say that you don't use 10 years to prepare for madness. Otherwise, for how long will you be mad? So you need to get this thing going. And the third point is, which is quite interesting, is you were talking about the toolkit, which was the main point that we're looking at, we are listening to, is all the national regulatory bodies for higher education or quality assurance agencies in all these countries. I think they should be contacted. They should be told that there is a toolkit which has been ready since 2005 or 6 or 7, but many of them are just playing as if they don't know it, or because we have not formally told them. I think they should be told, rather than, there's no need they inventing the wheel. We should let them know that we have this, and that they should, ACD is the expert organization on ACD, so nobody should take it away from them to do that, and it's being done on behalf of Africa, and that this should be available to everybody. So thank you very much for your presentation. So the next person to present is Professor Olivia Papong. it is 12, but by my time, it is 19 minutes past the hour, and your time starts now for the next 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. Am I well set online for you?
Yes, yeah.
My slides were projected.
Go ahead, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much once again, Professor Chair. And I also want to add my voice to thank Professor Goski Alabi, the chair of ACDE, for coordinating us to get this program coming out so successful. I am doing that of the University of Perspective from University of Ghana, where I serve as the Dean of the School of Continuing and Distance Education. So I am sharing the case of the University of Ghana. We are within my School of Continuing and Distance Education is within the College of Education, and our vision is to promote a world-class ICT-driven research and then teaching in all we do. So as a school, one of our objectives of the college and therefore the school is to promote the use of ICTs in our instructional delivery. And we have a Department of Distance Education, which was, we started running our program often as Professor Jegede said. And Professor, before I forget, my intention was to also appreciate you for when you came to Ghana for the ICODEL conference and that innovative presentation that you made. We are forever grateful for that. So in our case, University of Ghana, we started a distance education program in 2000. Not the distance education itself, as Professor Jegede said, the history is far long. We had the Foresee colleges, we had GCO levels being run at a distance and so many. But then for the degree program, that's when we started 2007. And then in 2014, we started a little of blending here and there with some little bit of online tutorials, continuous assessment and others when we had the Sakai Learning Management System. And the game changer then came in last year with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. What the current affairs, what is it? Realizing that our enrollment, for instance, we were kind of having more students not accepting our admission. And what is it for me here? It means that, some of them, they'll say, well, you give me admission, I'm not in Ghana, I'm abroad, I'm somewhere, I'm from Nigeria, can I participate online? Then we'll say, no, thank you, because before that, we are not fully online. And therefore, because we were not fully online, we were losing out on some of the students that were given admission to. Now, when the COVID popped up and we had to go fully online, as an administrator and the head of the units or the school, with my head of department of distance education, we had to really train about 300 tutors online for about 15 hours. We had to also set up an online monitoring system where all of us faculty and the management team were put on course sites to be able to get a sense of how the interaction is going, the participation of students and faculty, and even the technical hitches that were all going on as we have been experiencing our platform here. So we're doing this kind of monitoring online, and we also realized that unlike years back when we were doing it physically, with this online monitoring, we were able to cut down costs. We were also offering student support services, and then we were giving online counseling, and students were coming out with issues, kind of about 33% of them having career issues, and then 50% anxiety and stress issues, and 70% issues of study skills and all of that. We had about 10,000 students that we were managing online. And therefore, I think the key objective for this webinar is the issue of policy direction. On this slide, I could then propose that to inform our policy, we would have to improve the administrative systems for the delivery of online learning. And we also have to accelerate the technology mediated learning. And then as for our unit, we've been operating at the undergraduate level for too long, and it's time we look at some postgraduate programs for online delivery. The black spot here physically indicates the centers in which we are having learning centers. But now with the online delivery, we've gone out of this scope and we are all over the world. Policy direction for this presentation again. For us as a unit, we are thinking that, we've had tutors managing the online, managing the tutorials, tutors who are not lecturers, they are not faculty, we may say teaching assistants and all of that. And the Ghanaian thing, distance learners will say that they want to get the sense of faculty themselves as a parity of esteem and all of that. And by going online, it gave us opportunity. In this semester, we are piloting having faculty to offer tutorials for our distance learners. What does it mean for faculty? It means that with online setup, you just set up one course site and it's used for your regular students. It's also used for what we call University of Ghana City Campus to another cohort of students. And the same course site goes for distance learners. And it's really a seamless transition. So we are leveraging on COVID and we are leveraging on the online teaching and therefore bringing in faculty to support our distance learning online. And we feel that once we're able to have a successful pilot, we can then upscale it. And that would enhance the quality of our delivery and our enrollment and retention of our students as well. Because then there wouldn't be much difference between the on-campus students and then also our distance learners. As a school and as a dean, we're also looking at mainstreaming the distance and what I'm calling mainstreaming distance education at the University of Ghana. Now, whether we like it or not, thanks to COVID, every student is a distance learner. And I'm sure Professor Jegede will be happy with it. We've been pushing, distance learning here and there. And the traditional minds have been struggling to accept it. But now with COVID, every student on each campus is a distance learner. So post-COVID, what happens? I will move for the situation where this kind of seamless transition, yes, the university may say we have different categories of students we admit. But then once we all online, we would have all students of different categories, those we say traditionally admitting into distance learning, and then with those traditionally admitting into campus, they will all have a common platform, whereby they will all be accessing the learning materials, their assessments, and everything. And that way, for me, I will see it as mainstreaming distance education at the University of Ghana and beyond. And then as a school, because we have been a department that have been overseeing the distance learning program of the university, it will be our responsibility when we are mainstreaming totally. And then we would have to support them with all the technical backstopping skills that they need so that the hitches will be minimal, to all the academic units that will be in the university. The big thing, as Professor Ogidana and then we've all noted in our initial presentations, and then in the survey that came out for policy direction also, once we are all stakeholders here, it will be great for us to push for how we can have subsidized data for internet connectivity, reliable internet connectivity indeed, and then also training our faculty, because the traditional mode of teaching is not the same with online. And then what do? We do all these things so that both faculty and students with effective training, we can do very good professional online teaching and learning. Thank you very much, and I'll be available for question and answers that come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Papong, for such a wonderful presentation, all done on under 11 minutes instead of the 15 minutes. It's fantastic. I really applaud, and I love and applaud your presentation that dwelt on policy directions at the University of Ghana. I think that's the way to go for every university in Africa. And indeed, you have given us a template for which the CESA group here, the subgroup, can then look at and modify and work out on a continental level, if not just continental, probably on a sub-regional West African level. So thank you so much for that. I need to add that in Nigeria at the moment, the federal government, through the National Universities Commission, is enrolling most of the, or many of the federal government and even other private face-to-face universities to establish what is called Distance Learning Institute. So at the moment, we have 36 of them, about 36, that have been empowered to have a distance learning institute within their campuses. So this policy will be nice because it will, if we look at it, it will embrace everybody. But for the advantage and information of ACD, it means you have right on the spot another 36 member institution you can grab immediately and let them know that they are there. So thank you very much, Professor Papong. I think we'll listen to the student perspective, and that will be given by Mr. Peter Koje, and thereafter we'll have the president of the ACD, and who is the driving force or coordinator of this sub-cluster, to now spend the 7 or so minutes that will have been taken by Professor Abubakar Barry to talk to us on some of these issues and probably elaborate on some. And then, but if for any reason, anyway, any miracle that brings Abubakar Barry, then we'll also still give Barry some few minutes to speak. So now let us go to the student representative, and he's actually one that we are really, really looking forward to listening to, because we are all here because of the students, because of the learners. In one of my presentations or write-up or paper, I have said that we should no more regard distance learners as students. There is a different definition now of learners, because you learn, we all learn now from whatever they call it, from the labor ward to the grave. So it's continuous learning, it's lifelong learning. There's no more student. A student is put in a very straitjacket block. So now we see you as learners, and you are representing all the learners in Africa, albeit West Africa at the moment. So thank you, Peter, and please go ahead for the next 15 minutes. It is 12:32 or 32 minutes past the hour, and then you have your 15 minutes, which will be at 47 minutes past the hour. You must shut up. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Prof. Chair. Good afternoon and good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. I would want to say a few words of appreciation. And first, I would want to thank the AAU under whose auspices this event is being organized. I'd also want to say words of thanks to the AAU and the European Union for creating the space for us to have this all-important conversation. I'd also want to thank Obriel for the technical support we've enjoyed from them, especially from Appeal, thank you. And last but by no means the least, I'd want to thank Prof. Goski Alabi for being the initiator of this project. As an organization, we've worked with Prof. Goski Alabi for some years now, and the time that we've done so, she's been a progenitor for e-learning and online learning. At the time, the concept of e-learning and online learning in our part of the world seemed a bit far-fetched and perceived in some quarters as an option for only the students who could not make the cut into mainstream university. But today we know better. We should not forget the good works of the pioneers like Professor Alabi, who have been staunch advocates for online learning and e-learning, even when it was hugely unattractive. Given that Kaila and Veronica have already provided a student perspective in the survey, which I'm happy to say that I was a part of, And given that we have done 11:30 and we barely have a few minutes, I would rather that I do mine at 5 minutes and cede the remaining 10 minutes to the Q&As, especially against the background that a lot of students have joined today to ask questions, and I would like that they have that opportunity to ask the questions that they've joined today to do so. I would move straight to look at the guiding questions that have been posed. And first is that we're asking that should e-learning become a requirement for every institution in Africa? And I would say that we've been involved in a number of studies in this short while during the COVID period. One that was conducted by the IAU, and then the other one that was conducted by the Education Sub-Sahara on education in emergencies. Because of our involvement, we're aware that online learning is creating a lot of disparities in terms of access. So the big question that we have to ask is, should we still go ahead to make a case for it, especially given that we are learning that a lot more people are not able to sign up, not that they don't want to, but because of a lot of constraints. For two reasons, we've always answered yes. The first is that we understand that there's a lot of massification of higher education that is going on. And it is clear that the brick and mortar will no longer offer us a sustainable path to include everybody as we go ahead to talk about SDG 4. And so it is clear that the only way that we can create that space to accommodate everyone is if we go online, is if we introduce e-learning into the fabric of our existing teaching models. Second is that we also realize that the cost that is associated with the brick and mortar inherently creates a barrier against accessibility. And I'll explain that in my subsequent point. For these two reasons, we see that it's a plausible path to do online learning and e-learning if we're able to leverage on the existing capabilities of e-learning and online learning to create the scale that would break accessibility constraints. I want to share with you the model that is being used by the University of the People. And the concept is that the brick and mortar are the costs that are heavy. And so there's a shift such that if you're able to waive off all the costs that come with the brick and mortar, and you leave only the costs that are just tuition related, you'll be able to, for example, have a learning procedure for 4 years that would cost just around $2,000. Now that answers the second question of whether e-learning or online learning will reduce significantly what cost constraints there are that serve as a barrier. And so given that we're able to go online, we're sure that the cost that we have to pay in the 4 years would go down significantly. And as an organization, we advocate strongly for education being a right and not a privilege. And if it's a right, then we're implying that all barriers that there are should be removed. It should be seen as a public good, such that everybody can access it to the extent that they want to do so. And so these are the backgrounds that we're looking at in terms of if we want to say as students, to what extent do we want online? And it's a conversation that we've been having amongst ourselves, whether we wanted, what are the barriers, what are the constraints. And what is clear from the survey would show that the intent to have it is one that we embrace wholly. And if you ask, is there something that we want to continue post-COVID, the survey answers yes. And all around, I think that in terms of the practice of how flexible it is, in terms of how we're able to access it from locations, in terms of how we even save transportation, the hostel fees and other costs, it is clear that the online really significantly offers us a certain path. However, there are also the constraints that are imposed by way of the internet connectivity, the gadgets that we need to be able to access it, and most importantly also the accessibility of faculty, even as we're using this. So if we're able to look at the recommendations that has been made in the survey, as against the constraints that we have seen, I'm sure that we will be able to have a conversation. And you also asked that what are some of the concerns that we see as a result of using the e-learning platforms. Again, it comes with the complexity and that lack of training and lack of preparedness. To the extent that we're able to have the requisite training, get an understanding of the usage of the platforms, I'm sure that is something that we'll all embrace. Lastly, we've said that what would we want e-learning to look like if it's to be effective in our institutions? And I think that part of the survey also answers that. And so, for example, to what extent can we get access to resources without having to pay for them? So if we have a platform such that we can integrate our online learning platform, the online libraries, into the online learning platforms, will offer us that integrated approach to getting the materials that we need. And I think that here, the Lawa University has a module like that. I'm aware that their module puts together the resources that you need by way of the library in terms of the books that you need for the work that you have to do. At the same time, also it gives that opportunity to submit your assignments, engage, interact, and all of that. So I think that there are modules out there, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel in that sense. We really have to benchmark against the practices that are already ongoing and to do something that would solve a couple of the problems that we face. And so I've said at my opening that it's something that my colleagues Munkaila and Veronica have already said. And so I'm not going to spend so much time to repeat what they've already said. And so I'd rather that I cede the remaining time that I have for Q&As, especially for the students that have joined to have that opportunity to also ask the questions. And so on the basis of that, I would want to end my submission here and then wait for the Q&As. Thank you very much, Prof.
I can't believe this, that a student leader will keep very well within time, and you have actually left with us 7 good minutes, which is fantastic. If this is the way our 21st century students or learners are doing in Africa, then the future is very, very bright for all of us. You keep to time, you don't keep what is so-called African time or whatever it is. Thank you so much for that. And I like a few things you have mentioned. Again, you were talking about you're advocating for education being a right of everybody, which has always been. Afterwards, that is what the UN said in 1948 in the discussion, that education should be a right of everybody. You are also talking about, and because of that, if that is the case, then education is a right for everybody. Please, could you take off your share screen? Thank you very much. So if education is a right for everybody, and everybody must learn, and everybody must have access to education, you are saying, must e-learning be compulsory to every student? It's not even a question of whether it must be compulsory to a student. It's that any student who does not embrace e-learning will be left for dead in the train station, because that's the medium of teaching and learning now. If you don't do it, you are gone. It's just like everybody is on either a Telegram, or you are in WhatsApp, or you are whatever. And if you are not there, you are kind of left left in the train station. So that's what's going to happen. So to learn, what we are being told is that that's what, and every university should go on it. There's no reason why anybody should stop. And I've just told you that in Nigeria, they have license 36, NUC has license. So we are now moving on.
Prof. Barry is on now, so
yes.
If we give him the chance.
I've just seen him. I've just seen him, and I'm going to ask, do you want to speak before him, or you want him to speak before you?
Prof. Barry should speak. That's
okay, fantastic. Okay, again, can they take off, Peter, can you take off your share screen? Or is it me that is holding? Okay, thank you.
I actually haven't shared.
That has been done. Thank you very much. We went to have Professor Abubakar Barry to speak with us at the beginning, but he was going to catch a flight. But now that he must have caught the flight and he must have arrived safely, we are so pleased to have him with us. And we'll give him a chance to speak to us for 7 minutes on the infrastructural readiness of our doing e-learning in Africa. So, Bubakar, it's your turn now, and your time begins right now at 43 minutes past the hour. So, at exactly 50 minutes, you will have to stop and let people react. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jegede. I think I will be very brief. because I'm actually in the lounge. It's quite noisy, and I cannot speak very loud because of the people around me. I just want to make a very short submission, and we are always talking about e-learning, distance education, etc., etc. And sometimes we forget about the infrastructure needed to be successful in all the initiatives we are doing. And I do think that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how poor our infrastructure is. And fortunately, I do think that it's a wake-up time for governments and for officials to see how important it is to invest in infrastructure. When I talk about infrastructure, I'm not just talking about interconnecting institutions, allowing students to access learning materials, etc. I'm also talking about infrastructure needed on campus, so that at least for universities, that are still, we will still need universities, brick and mortar. It's not the one or the other. I think is a complement between the two paradigms. But it's very important that governments and leaders of higher learning institutions see how important it is to invest in infrastructure and also to create some kind of synergies and create partnerships with telecom operators. Because if we have to access to learning materials, if researchers have to collaborate, if learners have to interact with teachers, etc., etc., that needs infrastructure, a solid infrastructure in place. Fortunately, there are quite a lot of initiatives around on the continent. I do remember Professor Jegede knows that. He was my boss at AAU. And we started actually in the mid-2000s, putting in place what we call national research and education networks, and interconnecting institutions, having a collaboration platform, having platforms where we can store learning materials, that can be accessed not only by institutions in one country, but around the region and even around the world. So I do think that it's time that governments and other officials support more. There's national research and education networks that are interconnected at regional levels. When I take, for example, in Eastern and Southern Africa, it is a UbuntuNet Alliance that is there. If I take West Africa, is West and Central Africa is WACRE. Northern Africa is ASRE. So I do think that we have actually the foundation, of putting together a continental infrastructure that is connected to other regions in the world, so that our learners can access materials not only in for the institution or even countries, but at regional level and international level. So I do think that it's time that we invest in that, because it's good to say, okay, we need distance learning, lifelong learning, people having access to learning materials from wherever they are and whenever they want. But all of this cannot happen if we don't have a robust infrastructure in place to support that. So I want to stop there and just to say that there are initiatives on the ground. So it's time, that we focus on seeing how we can strengthen these initiatives so that we have the needed infrastructure to do distance learning, distance education, and to have, an environment, that allows people to learn, from wherever they are, whenever they want, and, without even being, let's say, connected, officially or formally, to a learning institution. Thank you very much.
Prof, thank you so much. Sorry.
Here.
Sorry.
Sorry, Prof.
Hello?
Jagat, I may come in briefly. If Prof. Barry is still on, I would want him to touch a little bit on AFRAN and the fact that this collaboration within the CESA subcluster is with Afran, and he represents Afran, and to tell us just in 1 minute what the Afran is doing practically for institutions. Thank you.
Barry.
Sorry, I was muted. Actually, the way it works is that on every continent, that is what we call a regional research education network that interconnects, all, NRENs, all national research education institutions, networks in that region. So, but you know that Africa is huge. So when we started this program in the mid-2000s at the Association of African Universities, we said, okay, because it will be difficult to do everything from scratch, let us, have some kind of clusters. Let us have Eastern and Southern Africa form a regional network, have West and Central Africa form a regional network, have Northern Africa form a regional network, and then we interconnect them to form, a continental research and education network, which is AFREN. So what we are doing is that we put our efforts together. Everybody in her region, will do the needful, and then we interconnect their regional networks. So as Professor Alabi said, so I'm here representing AFREN, which is the African Research Education Network, which is actually the interconnection between UbuntuNet Alliance for Eastern, Southern Africa, WACREN, West and Central Africa, and ASREN, Northern Africa. And ASREN is also serving the Arab world in general, the Middle East. So by this way, by doing that, we have now a continental platform where we can share resources and collaborate among us. And from this platform also collaborate, with partners, with peers, outside Africa, in Europe, in the US, in Asia, etc. This is what we are doing at AFREN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Alabi, for asking Professor Barry to tell us about the AFREN, which is fantastic because he's just telling us what the subcluster really requires, really needs to bring everybody on board with regards to distance education in Africa. But what Barry has just done, which is fantastic, which is a practical definition of distance learning, or if you like, e-learning, is that you can talk to anybody, you can join any group, you can do any research, you can do any teaching, you can do any learning, no matter where you are, what you are doing, or whatever time. And he is right at a lounge at an airport, waiting to fly, and he has used his time so productively to be part of us that there is nothing else that can be used to define distance learning or e-learning different from what he has just done. So thank you again, Barry, for being very practical and for telling us what it is. We look forward to having more relationship with you on the AFREN, because many of us who are researchers are interested in it. I am setting up a research laboratory at the National Open University of Nigeria for researchers here. And we are trying to have masters and PhD students across Africa if you want to join. And we do hope that we'll be able to work with AFREN, to provide us with that kind of a platform. So we now move on to Professor Goski Alabi, who is our coordinator. She's a vivacious, hardworking, never tired individual who moves. She even moves the mountain that doesn't move. So she now wants to talk to us in another 5 to 7 minutes on her own perspective as a researcher, as an administrator, as a learner herself, because we're all learning to the grave and everything on what we are doing today. So we'll give her between 5 to 7 minutes to talk to us, because if I give her anything more, we may stay here till tomorrow. So Professor Alabi, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. I'll try as much as possible to make it snapper, because the students are waiting for us with their questions. But first of all, I want to touch on a few issues that came up. And the first one has to do with the issue of distance education and transitioning or migrating to e-learning. I do agree perfectly with Professor Jagede in respect that distance education encompasses any form of remote learning, whether virtual or in-person in centers. But what we are talking about here has to do with not just the concept of distance education, but the operational construct of distance education within the African context. And as Professor Papong rightly said, for example, in the University of Ghana, which is typical of many of our universities around Africa, we find that when we talk about distance education prior to the pandemic, it was mainly a traditional system and a concept in which we use centers. And we bring students together from time to time. We send them pamphlets, we send them audios, we send them cassettes and all of that. So the virtual element or the technological element was not properly integrated into that concept. What we are looking at now is our ability to transition or migrate into e-learning and blended learning effectively. And I think that, for want of words, I would want to borrow the word that Professor Papong used, which is mainstreaming. We could mainstream to cover the entire university, because this is what the pandemic has done. It is no longer about an institute or a center within the university that is focusing on traditional distance education through centers, but how do we leverage technology so that all students have parity in learning, parity of facilitation, and also the kind of quality faculty that they would need, as well as the resources. So this is the concept of our transition. The next thing I would want to touch on has to do with the research. And just to say that with the concept that the AAU, the OBREL, and the African Union gave us, we are supposed to pilot this research within West Africa. So what we have done now is a pilot. And I trust that with what is coming up and the relevance of e-learning and blended learning, we would have more support from our development partners to scale up this kind of research and be able to provide better informed policy recommendations for the Policy Data Center at the AAU. The other thing I want to touch on has to do with the e-library. And like Mr. Kuji rightly said, at Lawa Open University, we have been able to develop an e-library, online library that has over 30,000 ebooks. And this technology was developed right here in Ghana with our own people. When we participated in the Corivip in Egypt in 2019, we had the opportunity of hearing that the University of Alexandria in Egypt has also developed such an e-library. It has become apparent from the students that they need these e-library resources to augment the quality of online learning. And so we would also want to use the opportunity to say that it would be prudent for the development partners, the AAU and the OBREL, where possible, to come together and see how we can push forward with the e-learning, e-library agenda by learning from the universities that have established one. And we at Lawa Open University College would be very happy to share our experiences and resources with other people. The books are available, and by the click of a button where the students have access to internet, they are able to get the books readily for their use. The last thing I want to touch on has to do with the issue of technology in teaching when it comes to quantitative, mathematical, and also the sciences. And there are areas that we may have to seriously consider. And this would include how we can deploy virtual and augmented reality in helping us not only to collaborate, but also to see how we can share e-laboratory resources. And then to conclude, I would like to say that we have come a long way, and we trust that moving forward, we will be able to move along with all the partners, particularly the ACDE, to ensure that the right things are put in place so that together with the development partners, we move the CESA subcluster on ODL agenda forward. So this morning I've worn two hats. One hat is the president of ACDE, and the second hat is the coordinator of the CESA subcluster on open and distance education or e-learning, ODL. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I quite agree with all that you have said, especially with e-library and others. Once an e-library is done by a particular university, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. All we can do is to link up with LAWE and everybody will share. There's no point there doing the same thing in any other place, except there are specialized resources that are meant for that particular university. So thank you for offering to Africa and what we have done. And I'm sure people will look at what is happening in North Africa. But what I like to do here in regards to your other mentioning of what we are doing, transitioning to e-learning, is to set in perspective the correct definition of distance learning and where we come in. I did talk about whatever we are doing, whether it's distance learning started as correspondence.
With your permission, if we can give the students the opportunity to ask their questions.
Definitely, I will go into that. That's why I'm going to go into that so that they will understand. I'm just saying there are variants. If you look at what I put on I'm sharing now, I hope you have seen it, then you will know that everything that we are doing, we have been doing falls under distance learning. But maybe when the students ask their questions, we'll be able to explain that. And then we'll move on for that. So I think what we have, if there is no other presenter, and I think there is none, is for us to go into a 15 to 20 minutes, other experiences, questions, and answers before we have a 2-minute closing remark by Professor Goski Alabi.
Okay, so Professor.
We'll now open this up to students, and if they wish, they can now ask their questions. So students or anybody who has the questions already, I think I've seen some questions that are being asked.
Professor Yegede, just one housekeeping thing. Our interpreters are supposed to be ending at the top of this hour. So if we could.
Okay, so why don't we just
maximum of like 5 minutes.
Why don't we just go quickly? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so that we don't lose the interpretation for the other languages. Yeah.
Okay, so if they are ending in the next 5 minutes, let's give room for 2 to 3 questions, and then we see how they can be answered by the panelists. So if you have any questions, could you just raise up your hand? I'm not seeing any hand that is electronically raised. Does that mean the students don't have questions? We have 93 participants. We actually got up to 95, and I think 2 have dropped off. There is the question and answer, which I have, and I will read it if nobody is saying, is it possible to do e-learning study free of charge in Africa, to do e-learning? And somebody said, he hasn't got an audio. That's not the question. It's just telling us what it is. And another one is saying we should share the presentations here and in our emails So those are some of the comments by participants, and I believe they are students. Another one is saying how can these findings relate to other African blocks or regions, and generalization of your results, that is to the people who did some work. There are other issues in French which have been raised. Somebody says he needs the contact phone numbers and mails for collaboration, for research, for online, for new technology sharing. In fact, it's from South India. There's an Indian who is saying, that is Professor Mohan. He's the head of international affairs, industry, and all that. He has been actually at Commonwealth of Learning headquarters. So we thank the participant from India supporting us. There's somebody saying how research can be promoted using online teaching learning platform. And somebody asked, the last one is, how do you assess the non-cognitive domain using ODL? So these are some of the issues. Maybe I will give the presenters 1 minute each if they so wish to respond. So if that's the case, we'll start with Professor Ogidon. 1 minute.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Thank you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm sure.
Okay, thank you, sir. With the first question on whether e-learning can be free in Africa, I believe it is possible if our development partners can come up, if you can reach out to them and they can come up with their assistance. Yeah. It may be possible.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
May we go to Teresa Muoma?
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe I would also want to add my voice to having free. Free is relative, because even when you say e-learning can be free, it means somebody somewhere has to bear the cost, because you have to get internet, you have to get, what I can say is that the costs that e-learning can really mitigate is the cost of maybe accommodation, like was said earlier, costs that require you to be present. Otherwise, for you to access online, you must incur some cost to be able to be online, or somebody must be able to incur that cost for you to learn. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Professor Papong?
Yeah, I think the e-learning being free is a hot question, because I've also flagged it. And I feel that we can explore it. And I think ACDE members, we could explore it. As Africans, we need it most, based on the premise that education is a right. It is not a privilege. So if we can, I mean, international communities give us scholarship to go and study. So why can't we say that ODI institutions, we assign some numbers for people to take? Yes, as the speaker said, you have to have your money to access and this and that. But we'll say we won't charge you tuition, but then you can access, and then once you perform and you do your activities and pass your test, we give you a certificate. And that could be a form of scholarship from different ODL institutions. So I thought we can exploit, and it will serve we, the Africans, very, very well. And then there were issues of cognitive assessment, you know, this and that and that. Everything is possible online, because if you go to the medical sector, they will tell you that, I mean, they have online medical care and all of that. So, and sometimes you may realize that even the online platforms can do it better. We just have to explore the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any comments on these points? Just one minute or half a minute, and then we move on to closing.
Sure. I mean, from our perspective, I mean, it's something that we've been advocating for. So to the extent that, I mean, it's feasible, it's an option that we would want to have. And concerning the questions, perhaps maybe what we'll do is that we'll catalog the remaining questions and send them over. Maybe there may be a mechanism that they can be answered and then displayed on our channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just 1 or 2 points before I call on Professor Goski-Alabi to close the webinar. The first is that, yes, distance learning or assessment or quality, whatever it is possible under distance learning. We have seen it has been demonstrated across the world, across professions, that distance learning can be used for everything, from law to medicine to engineering to whatever. So it is possible. Don't let us close our minds to distance. It's because we have many of us have been raised through the traditional method that we don't see the possibilities of all these things in distance learning. That's number one. Number two is that we don't have to keep looking for money from anywhere outside this country. There's a lot of resources in this country to support free access of our students to the internet. There's no reason why each university cannot convert some part of the tuition they get from the students into this aspect of e-learning. So tuition is tuition. When you were charging us tuition, you were doing it because of face-to-face. Now that we are no more doing it face-to-face, why can't you put some of it into the e-learning possibility? The third is that many students that we have in Africa, and supposedly we are the poorest in the world, the poorest continent, and yet our students carry the most expensive phones all around the place. If they do that, they spend a lot of money. At least some students will spend more than $5,000 a year to buy data just to do anything, to solve all sorts of terrible websites. So if they can address their learning to that, then it's also going to be possible. So again, let me thank you all for this wonderful opportunity and thank the CESA subcluster for allowing me to moderate this. I really enjoyed it, and I think I learned a lot from it. And so I would like to thank everybody who participated in this session. But let me hand over to Professor Alabi, who I'm sure will be doing the more elaborate thank you note. Professor Alabi.
Thank you very much, Professor Olugbemiro Jegede. I would like to thank very much the African Union Commission, the Association of African Universities, the Obrel Global, the African Council for Distance Education, and also the All African Students Union for their contribution to this particular expert roundtable. I also would like to take the opportunity to thank the presenters. We have here Professor Ogidan. Thank you very much. We have Professor Owoma, Teresa Owoma. Thank you. We have Professor Olivia Papong. Thank you. We have Mr. Peter Koji. Thank you. And Professor Barry Boubacar. We very much appreciate your effort and your commitment to this cause. We have had our earlier webinar on the IT infrastructure and what AFRAN is doing, and you have provided us with the report already. And so we would be forwarding same to the AAU for onward submission. We are very grateful for your contributions. I would like to thank the students and all the participants who took time over their very busy schedules to participate in this meeting. To our governments and regulatory bodies, I want to say there has been a clarion call for your participation and contribution in making sure that e-learning comes to stay in Africa to ensure quality education and access for all in higher education in Africa. So we want to use this opportunity to say, please come on board and promote and support the cause and the call. But finally, I would want to say that one of the biggest challenges we have in the ODL sector is the perceptual challenge, the perception that online education is inferior. And here we wish to call on our governments to come with policies and regulatory initiatives that would promote and support e-learning. Finally, our technical people could start exploring the possibility of having proctoring systems for examination integrity. On this note, I say thank you very much from the CESA subcluster for ODL. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Alabi. Thank you, Professor Egede, and thank you for all the attendees. We have our next webinar next week on 26th, also concentrating on student affairs. So we look forward to welcome you to the next webinar. Thank you so much.